Hello, I'm Deborah Sword.
Hi everyone, my name is Tyson Bankert. I have a question for you, Deborah. We got a question from a listener. He asked what our goal is for podcasting about a conflict owner's manual. I agree with him that we should put our podcast out there. And I know the answer, but first tell me yours. What's your reason for doing this?
Mm. I love getting feedback of all kinds, and I read all of the comments and emails. Being upfront about our goal was a great suggestion. I like being challenged to think about it. And I'm interested in hearing your goal too,
Mm,
Tyson. Since I teach that context is important, I have to get personal. I was raised in a high conflict family. My friends refused to come to our house because they couldn't stand my parents' constant insults and fights. It was,
really?
oh yeah, and it was traumatic and damaging to a kid to be exposed to perpetual conflict throughout my childhood. But eventually I got bored using my parents as an excuse for my poor social skills.
Mm,
Sure, it was their fault that they fought all the time, but it wasn't them who suffered when I blamed them. And I would have benefited from a conflict owner's manual. And I hope that our audience feels that way too. So, what's your goal for our podcast?
Well, first, I think it was the opportunity to co-host with you. I really think there's a really great exchange that we have. And I also really, mediation and conflict has been something that I've always been interested to think about and reflect on more, in my own community-based practices. And so I think just the opportunity that this provides for me to think about ideas or problems, they're part of the human condition. And so to sit down and understand um, how it all might work and be really reflective about it, is a really great excuse to just think, honestly. Conflict is a topic that I enjoy thinking about. So being able to work with you and think about conflict, has been a really generative experience for me.
Oh, I'm so glad. And like you, I try very hard to be a reflective practitioner. So
Mm,
yeah, the tagline for the podcast might be showing how the owner of a conflict can manage it, or we help you with your conflict competencies so you can do conflict better each time. And after so many years of studying subjects that help me be conflict competent, my conflicts almost stopped. My friends were happier to hang out with me. I learned a lot in my decades working as a conflict manager. My research was one of the first studies to treat conflicts as complex systems. And in a complex system, small actions make a big difference. And so each of us, by
hmm
owning our conflicts, we can make a big difference. So the book I'm writing captures my approach to managing conflict, which is different than other books on the topic. And my goal for this podcast is to share that approach because I know it's effective.
mm. I consider, think about how we define our terms. And so, for those of us who, for those of you who have been following along, you'll be familiar with some of these words. But conflict competence, as we use it here on this podcast, is the ability to use what you know, even when you're stressed out and under pressure. Many people take conflict training and admit they don't use the techniques as they learn them, or they use the skills more conversationally, right? More role playing, but not in the actual conflict. Rather than conflict competencies that people don't remember, rarely practice, and can't use. So, conflict owner's manual doesn't rely on a model to recall our new skills to learn. The other term that, to be clear about, and what is used, it means to own your conflict, like you did with your parents when you were younger. Conflict generates a lot of blame and excuses, at least in my experience. And owning your conflict removes blaming and excusing, so that you can really see what's really going on. Owning is another word for having agency, I think, in a conflict. being aware that you what you do and say matters, and responsibility of using what power you have in that conflict. What role do you play? What it doesn't mean though is taking the blame because you own that blame. Blame and excuses don't belong in owning conflict. I think it's I think by us, sharing about how to own conflict, we are able to support others along their journey, which is really what these podcast episodes are. I mean, you're writing a book, it's not how to avoid conflict owner's manual for a reason.
And that's it. After living so many of my early years, blaming my parents as an excuse for my inept conflict competence.
Mm,
It feels really good to own my conflicts because then I do have agency. I can take some responsibility and use the power I have, just the way you describe it. So the conflict owner's manual won't frustrate you with a formulaic model that isn't a good fit for you. The range of decision making and problem solving skills that you use in healthy relationships are what you are able to access in extraordinary and conflict situations because we assume that conflict competencies are transferable across
right.
contexts. So if your context is conversation, you have certain skills. That doesn't change in conflict. You have the same skills. So the conflict competencies don't focus on any particular context, such as home or family or school. It's for every context and every age. And as you own your conflict, you discover that what you know is often enough. And as you discover that what you know is often enough, you own your conflict.
Deborah, my goal is similar. I think, and these videos can be a body of work that can really help people to reflect and think about the ways in which they hold and handle conflict. I think number one, conflict is natural and it's part of being in relationships. And two, it's an opportunity. I often say that conflict is an opportunity to not only build better relations with other people, but it's not something that we want to try and avoid. So it's always an opportunity. And finally, I think it's really about we can take back our power that we've talked about and have the kind of social well-being that we all really deserve. And so I think as people really follow along, the conflict owners manual will help them be able to achieve at least some of those goals as well. And with that, I hope folks are able to learn a little bit more about why we come together every week and learn a little bit more about the conflict owners manual and how to handle your own conflict. I hope that folks can subscribe to the podcast as well. We're always looking to hear from you. So thank you so much for that question.
Thanks, Tyson, and thanks everyone for listening. Please share and like and leave comments. Suggest topics for the Conflict Owners Manual. Thank you.